Good evening. My name is Grace Law, and I'm professor and chair of architecture here at the GSD and principal of La Dolmen. A quick reminder that we have closed captioning, live captioning available. For those joining virtually, please click on the closed caption icon, and for our in-person audience, please use the QR code on screen and visit the AV booth if you need assistance. Upcoming in the GSD public programs, tomorrow, April 1st, Mohsen Mostafavi will join Homi Bhabha in conversation as part of the Department of Architecture's Positions series. And on April 7th, Kate Orff will present a lecture on her recent work. And on April 10th, the Joint Center for Housing Studies will host a half-day symposium on multi-generational housing. For more information and to see the full lineup of upcoming events, please visit the GSD's website. And tonight, we are grateful for AECOM for supporting our ability to bring this evening's speaker to the GSD. It is my pleasure to welcome Chatpong Chuenrudeemol, but I was going to say it more properly, Chuenrudeemol. That is not, that's the Western way, to Piper Auditorium. I met Chat with, when James Dahlman and I were both lecturing in Singapore last July, and we were faced with the full impact of Southeast Asia's summer heat and humidity. And as you know, Southeast Asia may be the world's most at-risk territory for climate crisis, affecting regional development, agriculture, and infrastructure. And of course, designers must navigate the region's environmental and energy challenges. This was a primary concern for Chat when he first returned to his native Bangkok to begin his career. Chat had moved to the United States at age 6, received his Bachelor of Arts in Architecture from UC Berkeley in 1994, and graduated from the MArch program here at the GSD in 2000. And some of his former professors are here tonight. Chat's own presence here now, teaching an option studio this semester, is emblematic of how the GSD is expanding its geographic reach to learn from many architectural cultures. Just as Chat himself began to apply his architectural training to the Bangkok conditions he was inhabiting again as an adult. Chat founded his eponymous Bangkok-based practice, Chat Architects, in 2001. He has become renowned for mixing tropical architecture with Thai urbanism, using strategies creatively adapted from the streets, alleys, and communities of Bangkok. I have never been to Bangkok, but it is full of romance and mystery to me. One of my favorite books is by Milan Kundera, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, where Bangkok forms the backdrop of a part of that novel. And so I look forward to hearing more about it tonight. The city, and CNN rated it #1 in its ranking of the world's greatest cities, presents a cauldron of contradictions. Temples reside between street markets, luxury towers rise above labyrinthian shantytowns, and the informal speaks directly with the formal. These dynamic conditions nourish Chat's ingenuity in creating a living tradition of bottom-up architecture, shaped by necessity and culture. In my favorite project of his, the widely celebrated Ang Sila Oyster Scaffolding Pavilions, he went beyond leveraging the vernacular tradition of building over water with bamboo and involved the local economy on many levels, including employing the community of fishermen to DIY the project. They had already devised what he'd called bastard bamboo structures for harvesting oysters. Bangkok Bastards, the title of tonight's lecture, derives from Chat's early research into design strategies that he was finding all over his hometown. Intuitive, scrappy examples of architecture without architects. With the same collaborative spirit that brought him to partner with the Fishermen Builders, he now continually builds an online archive of bastard architecture, or architecture with no traceable lineage made by everyday people, with contributions submitted from across Southeast Asia. The spirit of the website is as jaunty and as colorful, ad hoc aesthetic of Bangkok that it celebrates. So I want you to click on the About Us link for the zippy music clip on that website. Perhaps analogously, Chat has come to regard architectural programs not as formal client-prescribed functions, but rather as the everyday activities that ordinary people might do. For instance, on a breezy veranda in the hot weather. Chat recognizes these moments, rarely considered serious in design, as elements critical in shaping our cities today. And by drawing attention to Thailand and its distinct architectural scene, he counters a sea of sameness where local culture and organic urban forms are disappearing. Chat's option studio this semester, Shop House Metropolis, brings students into his project of reimagining the city from the bottom up, amplifying the voices of marginalized Bangkok workers while repositioning the shophouse typology within the urban grassroots economies of street food networks and night markets that might inform a new type of smart city. In 2020, Chat received Thailand's Silpathorn Award from the Ministry of Culture, the country's most prestigious recognition for contemporary artists. Internationally, his projects have received the Taiwan Golden Pin Best of the Best Spatial Award for Public Space, the Seoul Design Award for Sustainable Life, and the Gold Accolade for Australian Good Design, amongst others. His approach has affected the architectural culture of Thailand and beyond, advancing the understanding of the complexities of Southeast Asian cities. As for us, Chat's practice models how we can meet the realities of rapid urban expansion by situating architectural practice at the intersection of vernacular tradition, improvisation, and the rethinking of authenticity in design, all while rewarding us with a taste of Thai sanuk, or fun. So please join me in welcoming one of the most fun people I know, Chat. Thank you.
Wow, it's an honor to be here, and first and foremost, I must thank Grace. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for your support and your guidance. Thank you, Dean Sarah Whiting, for having me here. And lastly, you're not going to expect this, but Nader Tarani, thank you for being such a mentor, a brother, a friend, right, and everything all over all the years. So I was on MArch 1. I graduated in 2000. This is kind of a personal story because this talk is really about what happened after I went back to Thailand and became a little bit lost with architecture. And so what I'll show you is how this beautiful underbelly of Bangkok and Thailand has kind of shown me the way back into architecture. So here you see a simple canal in an hour outside of Bangkok, and a long-tail boat has just moved past these two other long-tail boats. The man in the yellow shirt is pulling on a rope, a pulley system, right? Pulling one boat from one side to the other, turning the two boats into a bridge. This is the thing that makes me happy and excited when I see these incredible concoctions. And after seeing this, what I do is I draw, and draw. I think seeing things from plans, sections, and elevations is the best thing that I could do to honor these funky concoctions. For example, there's an isometric, but we don't only draw the boats, we draw the dirty water, the stray dogs, the motorcycle taxis, the corrugated sheets. We curate the sections. This section is cut through the boat so you can see how the rope is given slack so that it doesn't get tied up in the propeller. We look at the details at how the pulley system is concocted, hacked at every joint. So in essence, with these three drawings, we kind of see the detail, the architecture, and the urbanism. And we always name them very simply, bridge, boat. And this is just one example of what I call Bangkok Bastards. They're homegrown concoctions created by everyday people to solve everyday problems in everyday life. And I've been collecting them probably since 2012. So Bangkok Bastards are live. They're not historic vernaculars from the past. They're always changing yearly, monthly, daily, sometimes by the hour. And they're usually made up of cheap, inexpensive, salvaged materials because the people who make them are probably the underprivileged, and forces them to kind of work within their means and thereby being very creative. This is one of the first Bangkok Bastards that infatuated me. I started recording them in 2012. So it's a construction worker house. They're all over Thailand. Construction workers in Thailand, like in many parts of Southeast Asia and South Asia, they live on site, right? They collect old materials, whether they're old steel tubes, timber, plywood, to create their own dormitories. But it's just not simply kind of a messy architecture. I was so fascinated by it, but I didn't want to be seduced by the romanticism of slum architecture. So at a certain point, I went in and started to measure and start to understand that it isn't just kind of things hastily slopped together, but there's a system to it. For example, the core itself, or the rooms themselves, are probably very hot and humid, 2.5 by 2 meter rooms, right? Very hot, kind of suffocating, and not much ventilation. But what makes life livable in the construction worker house is the scaffolding. This buffer space that allows you to not only block the sun and the rain, but is a space for eating, drinking, getting drunk, washing clothes, hanging laundry, a multi-purpose living space. So if you see that that's kind of a formula that construction workers play with, then they start to change it to solve other problems. For example, this is a construction worker house in the back of that site where debris was falling from above. And so the scaffolding was hacked so that it became a double roof, almost like a safety helmet, where the plywood top roof protects falling debris from puncturing the thinner corrugated sheet metal on the bottom. If you have scaffolding and core, you start to multiply. Core, scaffolding, core, scaffolding, core. From house, you have housing. The playfulness doesn't end in the diagrammatic level. The corrugated sheets get bent into a V. It becomes a water runnel that reflects back onto the underside of the corrugated sheets, making a beautiful kind of a light fixture, a natural light fixture. If they run out of corrugated sheets, they bring in agricultural tarp, which changes the meaning of architecture. For example, instead of a typical door with a doorknob, you basically just unbutton the door and you go inside. Once inside, there's no standard window. All the workers are pretty much lying or sleeping on the ground because it's cooler. There's no furniture. So they simply peel up the wall, creating kind of an aperture of light and air that comes in just where they're sitting. I was also very much interested in what I call the curtain sex motel. It's a building typology at first I was afraid to go into because, you know, strange things happen there, and I wasn't able to get access. But one day, I was able to find the owner of one of these curtain love motels, and he allowed me to go in and study his picnic curtain sex motel. They're usually named in a very cute, innocuous way. This one's called the picnic's curtain sex motel. So this is how it's used. Basically, a car comes up, approaches the love motel. There's a tunnel, right? The guest is usually arriving in a kind of a dark film car, and the person sitting next to him or her is usually not the appropriate spouse, a friend, right? As you approach, you go through the tunnel. Sometimes the tunnel is very scary because they buy a whole shop house just to carve a tunnel through. And then you emerge into this open air internal street where an attendant kind of beckons you into one of these curtain spaces, and they close the curtain. And then afterwards, you come out of your car, and there's a room attached to the parking spot where you can go in and play gin rummy or whatever type of games you want. After 10 minutes or 2 hours, you leave. And there's a secret exit, a side alley that allows you to make a quick escape because your husband or your wife may be waiting at the front entry. So here, I diagrammed it for you. Go out like that. This is the owner of the Picnic Hotel. His name is Papa Tony. He's an incredible individual. A lot of our projects are really inspired by the character of the owner. So Papa Tony, at first, promised that I would be able to renovate the Picnic Hotel, but then he basically gave it to his son, who hired another architect. So in its place was a neoclassical monster that was built. But then 4 years later, after breaking my heart, he said, "Chat, I just bought another sex motel. Would you like to renovate this one?" I said, "Yes." This one's called the Mit Paisan Curtain Motel. It stands for Friendship Motel. Okay. A little bit more about Papa Tony. So this is him in 2018. This is him in 1963. So he's a self-made man. He used to be a vendor. He sold Thai iced coffee with his wife. And he has a soft spot for street food. So keep that in mind as we develop the program. I talk about the program. Eventually, he saved up enough money to buy a taxi, eventually becoming a manager to a tailor shop that he named James Taylor. Some of you, the younger people may not get it, but the older people may get it. And eventually buying a slew of love motels. That's become his own business. So the Friendship Motel, has a courtyard just like the Picnic Hotel. It has the standard tunnel that the car would go through. Inside, you have the open air internal street. The problem with all living units or guest units and curtain love motels, they're very small because you don't spend very much time in them. They're about 3 meters by 4.5 meters. And what Papa Tony said, he said, create a beautiful architecture, a beautiful space, but wherever you do, you need to provide for 3 beds because I need to make more money. At that time, a lot of people were backpacking. Couples were backpacking to Khao San Road, which is kind of a hip place. But at that point in time, there were more young families coming to visit Thailand. So he wanted another bed so you could charge another extra head. So he said, whatever you do, you can't do expensive structural additions. And so I said, okay, this is what we'll do. We're going to cantilever a bed box from the existing structure so that we don't introduce any extra costs. And so there are these bed boxes that in the daytime you can play on your phone, you can read, look down to the street, but at nighttime it becomes a 3rd bed. So if this were the building kind of stripped of its kind of fake brise-soleil, right? What we added was these bed boxes. You see that? And these bed boxes were minimal in size because we wanted to be very frugal. It had a 1 meter clearance by 2 meter clearance, just enough for a twin-size bed. But what happens, you're left with these gaps between these little pods that are filled with the scaffolding that I told you about that you find all over kind of informal architecture in Thailand. But in this case, the scaffolding will turn a once dark and mysterious building inside out, turning this love motel into a street hotel that hopefully energizes and brings life back to this red light district. So the scaffolding is composed of 3 elements: the porch, the alley, and the outdoor theater. The alley is actually a vertical circulation that allows repairmen to service all the air conditioning and MEP systems so that you won't have maintenance people going through your room and your bedroom to service them in the balcony, which is usually the case in Asia. And so you've got this kind of walkway that repairmen can service MEP. But then there's another surprise function I'll show you later with these little vertical alleys. The porch basically makes most use of space that's usually neglected, which is the setback. So if this were the perimeter of the site, typical developers would say, Chat, put up a wall, a solid wall. We want to keep the vagrants out, and we want to create this private oasis garden, right? But what happens with terrible walls that we've seen in Southeast Asia is it kills the city. Nobody wants to walk next to a CMU wall. So instead, we decided to create this connector so that it's a veranda that allows locals on the sidewalk to kind of have a beer with the hotel guests inside. But also, we go back to kind of Papa Tony's first love of street food. So this is Brother Chicken. Thai people have weird nicknames. So his name is Chicken. So this is his armada of Thai sausages that he prepares every morning before he goes out. And so we had a conversation where, what if for breakfast, Papa Tony sends his guests down. Instead of just having a continental egg and bacon breakfast, you come down, you have Thai beignets or soy milk or Thai sausages, and you support the local economy. In that sense, you create a kind of a new, a great authentic branding for a street hotel. So it works both ways. And for us, architecture in Thailand isn't just walls and floors and roofs. It's basically folding tables, plastic chairs, food carts, all these non-architecture, even these blinking holiday lights create space, but space that's dynamic and always changing. So on the day, I forgot to mention that at that time, the municipality was cracking down on street vendors because they wanted to clean Bangkok up and turn it into a Singapore kind of a situation where you have hawker courts and you can kind of localize the vendors in one area. But to us, that would kill street food in Thailand, where vendors need to roam to find their food, right? So at that time, Papa Tony allowed vendors to come and sell on his private property so the police wouldn't chase them away. So if you remember the vertical alley that repairmen used to kind of service air condensers, on weekends and festivals, it turns into a vertical stage. And so I think this is our opening night. So the air condenser landings became dance platforms for these beautiful Japanese housewives who volunteered to dance for us. Come out, guests from other hotels come out, and what used to be a very dark and dangerous red light district is energized. As you go inside, remnants of the city, for example, these burglar grills that kind of adorn the neighbors' windows become motifs for our counter. We didn't have a lot of budget to hire an environmental graphics signage person, so I just talked to the floor epoxy guy. He just told me, hey, if you want to put a little symbol in the floor, yeah, go ahead. And I just went wild. I said, okay, this is going to be our new kind of signage system. You kind of come out of the elevator, you find the number of your room, and just follow the breadcrumbs to your front door. So this is one of the rooms where all the furniture is kind of on wheels and very flexible. There are a lot of bed lofts that are kind of lifted up, and that's kind of a sectional condition, right? Because this bed is right here, so the path is sneaking underneath here. We still kept the standard tunnel, but instead of leading you to kind of this internal street, there's a new experience. It's an outdoor theater with this lounge pool with 3 benches so you can watch a movie in the hot tropical sun or at night. We invented a new leg-dangling balcony that forces you to kind of turn out, not to only watch the movies, but to kind of greet visitors from other countries. It's really a great kind of communal space where people are engaging in conversation. It's kind of patterned after the typical Thai outdoor movie at Thai temples. And while you're watching a movie, we created this pulley system that brings popcorn up to your balcony while you kind of watch. So welcome. Next time you come, please have a visit. And you can choose your movie. Just call down to the desk and request, Transformers. So even though this scaffolding doesn't look like this scaffolding, for us it comes from the same DNA. So we've had a lot of projects and research in Bangkok, but the past 7 or 8 years we've gone out into the country and researched rural crossbreeds. Somebody asked me at Cooper Union, she asked me, why don't you use the word bastards? Right? I said, I feel okay calling city dwellers bastards, but if you call rural people bastards, I feel like I'd be under a lot of... And then we were working with indigenous people. I had to be careful with the nouns that I use. So crossbreeds, to make it safe. See, there's like a hush of non-laughter now. That's okay, I may not come back. So this next project is called the Indigo Loom House. My son, who's here, he's a second year at RISD. This is back when he was 10 or 11 years old. And this is my wife, Nong. She is a professor of crafts and kind of creates community and community programs. So I would tag along to her trips into the countryside. And this is one of the trips to Sakon Nakhon, which is an indigo textile craft village in the northeastern part of Thailand. And we saw beautiful textiles. But what I started to notice was that all the craftspeople were the elderly, which is common, right? Because all the young people aren't interested in crafts anymore. They would go search for jobs in the city. So you're left with kind of the elderly craft people with invaluable knowledge that would be lost. And they're always kind of creating textiles alone in their own house in the rice fields. So I thought it'd be interesting that there's an opportunity for a program. And also at that time, my wife suddenly had the inspiration that she wanted to buy a loom because she wanted to start weaving. And so we were very much into textiles, in support of Thai textiles. And I went and talked to the carpenter who built this house. I said, sir, I want to buy a loom. Where do I buy one? He says, me. I built looms as well, because that's all wood architecture. So that was a revelation to me that artifacts and architecture, it comes from the same place. And so we started to think about how the loom and the house are really made from similar components when you explode them. And we start to see if we could combine these new components of the house and the loom into a new program that potentially could be workshop and housing for these elderly craftspeople and textile workers. And so this is an idea that I had, on a concept that we developed this loom house before anybody hired us. We were just interested in it. And as usually is the case, when we do research, eventually, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years, an empathetic person comes along who's a perfect partner. And in this case is Kun Man, who is a wonderful textile artist who's in Sakon Nakhon as well. So he does these amazing, not only indigo textiles, but all these natural colors from bark and leaves. And so he wanted to kind of collaborate with us in order to kind of create this new workshop for his own textile workers. So these are the wonderful indigo workshops that he has in his own forest. And basically, he was an ex-lawyer who decided to adopt, to try his hand at textiles and became a wonderful artist. And he bought this piece of property to create a forest of natural pigment plants where he can kind of examine and experiment with indigo and other dyes. So as usual, we always have to research the artifacts and the architecture around weaving. And we started with the aunties who wove the textiles in Kun Man's business. So this is Antique Git and Antique Gao. And they're the ones who create these beautiful textiles. This is called a ban tai tun. In Thailand, as common with a lot of Southeast Asian countries, there are houses on stilts that are lifted up to escape the floodwaters. And the underbelly of the house actually becomes the workshops where the looms are and other kind of weaving artifacts. So, of course, what we do is we try to understand all of these spaces and how they're used. Not only that, we started to understand the mechanics of the room more in detail. Not only the loom, but also other tools that are required in weaving and spinning. For example, this is a warping frame, right? So I'm making it very simple, but weaving is very complex, especially when you have to set up the weaving process. You have, the warp string, thread, and the weft. Basically, you have to kind of count the length, the total length of the warp before you set up each textile. So this is a tool that you basically just walk around maybe 200 times to count correctly how much warp you need. It's an interesting tool. So here, Pakit is pulling 10 threads from here and kind of wrapping around this dowel. She would do it, let's say, 500 times, so that that's how she prepares to create the foundation for this textile. We thought that was an interesting tool. We recorded it. We didn't know how we were going to use it. And then at the end, we wound up with all these Bangkok Bastards and basically tried to kind of create a new concoction called the loom house. As always, we always try to use salvaged materials. These were old columns from old Thai houses that have these great notches in them where the beams were notched in. So these scars to us were very beautiful, and we want to kind of celebrate them. As you can see, because this is called a loom house, the structural elements, if you see these 4 legs, they're actually the dimensions of the legs of a loom. So these 4 loom legs actually support the whole house. And this was situated right next to a rice paddy in Kun Man's garden. And as you can see, the legs become the loom, but also are structural columns for the house itself. And even the notches are kind of improvised so that the cross beams are kind of snaking up the notches. And Kun Man one day decided or suggested, wouldn't it be great if we could dye the house the same color as his textile? So he created a new tempera indigo paint in order to paint the house in indigo. And here the villagers are kind of helping out. So from the loom house, it became the indigo loom house. And I think there's a short video. The bottom level is reserved for the wet process, for example, kind of the mixing of the indigo and the dyeing. And here you see we created this new bastard, the warping wall, that we hybridize this warping frame into a kind of a vertical element. The handrails also become containers for the indigo spools as well. And now the weavers can actually come and weave together rather than being alone in their homes. And on top of being able to weave together, there are now weekend workshops where the weavers can come and share their knowledge with the community, whether from Bangkok or foreigners who've traveled afar. So it gives kind of new meaning to the weavers that used to be isolated, the underbellies of their house. In actuality, the loom house, as I told you, it didn't start with this project. The first concept was actually, I call it the loom condo. I imagined a rurality that would be densified and modernized, not with concrete or cement roads and apartment high-rises, but there would be a density, a beautiful natural density of architecture that would sit in the rice fields and really sustain the idea of agricultural life. And we actually did this not only to create kind of a community for the grannies, but it's actually for all the workers in Bangkok, because many of the workers in Bangkok come from northeastern Thailand, whether they're street sweepers or motorcycle taxi drivers, construction workers. And these are some of the interviews that we conducted, because all the migrant workers don't want to live in Bangkok. It's noisy and polluted, and they're separated from their family. So some of the quotes are, rice farming is hard, hard work, but if I could go back to it, I would. Country people could take care of each other, not like in the city where everyone is just looking out for themselves. I miss my daughter. She's 7 now, growing up so fast. I should be there with her, but I can't. Right? So from Sakon Nakhon, we go to Ang Sila. So this is called the Ang Sila Oyster Scaffolding Project, located in Chonburi Province, just about an hour's drive from Bangkok. So Chonburi Province is quickly modernizing. You have a lot of factories, as well as kind of cookie-cutter developer homes. But in this little corner is like a little anachronism, out of space, out of time. This beautiful Ang Sila fishing village with these beautiful radial streets. So we basically had a project with a client who wanted to develop this piece of land into kind of a mixed-use space. Eventually, that project didn't happen. But while working on this project, we suggested that we actually should research the neighbors in order to create a new program. So we wound up 3 years researching and kind of becoming very attached to the fishermen and the oyster fishermen in Ang Sila, and really having a great time and building great relationships. So not only did we look at the ways in which they fished or cultivated oysters, we of course looked at Ang Sila Bastards, whether they're architecture on land or in the water. The first thing we looked at is the oyster scaffoldings. It's this beautiful farms that are dotted in the coast of Chonburi. Not many Thais know that this exists, actually. It's this wonderful urbanism in the middle of the water. And as you go out, I think not on the sea salt as well as the sounds of the ocean, it's really an incredible environment, which I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could do something that engages with this great environment? As the water goes down, you see how the oysters are revealed. They're hung from the strings. And of course, we go out, we measure, we draw. Even though they're not very accurate, it was said that this was 2.5 meters in dimensions, and I asked the fishermen how they kind of measure 2.5 meters, and they basically, oh, well, we just did it like this. And that was it. From the oyster scaffoldings, we travel out even further to this, what I call the Oyster Farm Security Guard Outpost. So basically, what happens at night in this oyster farm urbanism, we have oyster pirates who come with scissors, and they cut these oysters. And if you get away with an entire scaffolding, you can make a lot of money, thousands of dollars. So the fishermen have created these little pavilions that they kind of guard their oysters with shotguns. But what's amazing about the construction with these bamboo scaffolding, they're all made by the fishermen themselves, because no contractor would know how to build this. They go to the nearby auto factory plant and buy these rejected car seat belts that are salt-proof, waterproof, sun-proof, and create this new binding. right? While researching this, of course, we start to understand not only the beautiful elements of the culture, but the problems that came with ang sila. For example, at that time, a lot of people from the city would say that ang sila fishermen were not very honest because the seafood we would buy at the market there and have them prepared fresh steamed, as soon as they come back to Bangkok, an hour later it would be spoiled and rotten. And so a lot of the public felt that they were selling unfresh and spoiled seafood to the public. But that's really not the case, because a lot of the problem that happens is that the fishmongers who go and buy the fish or the oysters and the clams from the fishermen early in the morning after a catch could take hours and sometimes maybe days to take the oysters to the market without cold storaging them. So that little portion of time that the oysters or fish is spending that's not in ice, that's part of the reason it doesn't come fresh. So we kind of isolated that as a problem and tried to find possibilities to solve that. So Uncle Jun, every project always has kind of a main protagonist that actually helps us drive the forward. So this is Uncle Jun, kind of a longtime fisherman. So he taught us how to kind of choose seafood, whether they're crabs or oysters. He invited us over to his home, and where his wife kind of cooked secret ang sila recipes for us. And we would dine with them, and we thought, how wonderful is this to eat fresh seafood that's just freshly caught. And so we thought about bastardizing the oyster scaffolding and the oyster farm outpost into a new hybrid called the Ang Sila Oyster Scaffolding Pavilion, where you can take guests out to have oysters that's pulled fresh from the ocean and learn about the lifestyle and kind of the knowledge and the cultural knowledge of the fishermen. So this is how the fishermen build their structures. First, they cut this local bamboo from nearby forests, load them onto the boats, take them out to sea. Once they're out to sea and they find their spot, this is how they drive the poles into the muddy waters, the muddy ground, pogo stick style. Once the poles are installed, the bamboo beams are tied. And you can notice that they're overlapping. They never cut any bamboo because they don't want to create any garbage or leftover pieces for the ocean. So everything is saved. We were doing a little gable for kind of a tarp roof. And because we don't want to cut any of the bamboo, it becomes a new architectural language. You have these little antennae that kind of stick up. If the ceiling height is lower, the antenna becomes longer. If the ceiling height is higher, the antenna becomes shorter. So on the day of the tour, guests would come and load up onto the fishing boat, so that the fishermen now have kind of a new economy as kind of tourists, tour guides. We would go out and kind of tour the oyster bamboo farms first. And as you go through the oyster farms, you see a flash of red, and then you come upon the oyster scaffolding pavilion. The boat will drop you off at the front, where you climb these ladders. And as you go through the portal, you start to understand that all of this are materials from the ocean, materials that the fishermen use. Nothing foreign has come in. Even the rope that we use to tie the oysters are used to bind the bamboo. And this is this beautiful detail of, I call it accelerator. So you have the seat belt that is tied around this, the joint, but because a human person doesn't have the strength to tighten it, so you have these dowel accelerators. You twist so it's tight, and then you tie it off with this red string. I think it's a beautiful detail, a common detail. So as you walk through from the one gable to the triple gable, this is where the open kitchen is. But instead of a refrigerator or a freezer, you basically just jump down and pull up fresh oysters to eat. And in doing so, you're able to kind of explain to guests how important it is to kind of maintain the health of the ocean, because the oysters you're about to eat are basically coming from the ocean. You guys must be getting hungry. So in doing so, we're able to allow restaurants that there's a great restaurant that serves fresh shrimp pad thai, so they're allowed to kind of serve their dishes here as well. This scaffolding isn't a commercial enterprise. We can't operate a restaurant, but the guests can pay for the food on shore, and they can be served here. So it's another way to extend this kind of local economy to other restaurants. So the best time is really in the late afternoon when the sun's going down. As you look towards the shore, you see these bamboo scaffolding. As you look in the other direction, you see the open ocean, and that's because we put this right at the seam of the oyster farm. So, the scaffolding isn't just for tourists. It actually becomes a rest station for the fishermen themselves. Many times when they're coming back early morning from an early catch and they can't dock because the water level has gone down and they can't dock. So this is about 1 kilometer outside, so they can stop and fish and wait. And many times they bring their families here on weekends to kind of fish and hang out. So in July 2024, a storm swept through and demolished the structure. I sent a message to the kind of a group that we'd taken on the scaffolding before, and they were so sad. But the next morning, I woke up to find 110,000 baht in our account, which is a third of the total we needed to build the first scaffolding. So that the kindness of these donations allowed us to do scaffolding 2.0. It's smaller, more compact, rather than kind of this linear formation. It becomes a little courtyard in the middle of the ocean. Do I have time for one more? Yeah, great. So this is a project we haven't shown anybody before because we just got the photos last week. So the latest project, we've been working with the Karen indigenous people. So the Karen tribe, hill tribe, basically live, their numbers in the 5 million. And they basically are indigenous people who live along the borders of Myanmar and Thailand. And the group we've been working with is right about here in Ratchaburi province, right there. So from Bangkok to Ratchaburi, it's about a 3-hour drive because it's up mountainous terrain. So the Karen people live very much in balance with nature, especially in the forests and the mountains. But as like with all indigenous populations, you have kind of an older generation who are living with the forest and kind of living sustainably. But you have a younger generation, right? Who here, they're kind of dressed in, the typical Karen outfits, but also, they enjoy TikTok and YouTube and 7-Eleven's just like a normal kid. So this intervention is for all types of Karen population. And a lot of our projects now is done in conjunction with KMUTT. So it's King Mongkut University. Basically, it's a research and community development team that my wife, right there, the second from the left, works with. So I'm lucky to be able to kind of attach myself to this wonderful group that helps develop indigenous into communities. So the program that the group called Yurdener tries to do is to educate not only the people in the community, the people outside community, in protecting the Karen forests and mountains, and basically to preserve this unique way of rice farming called rotational farm. Also to kind of preserve traditional Karen textiles and weaving, as well as kind of festivals and dance. So this entire kind of program allowed us to come in and help and tell stories. So in creating this program, they were able to tell 17 stories about the culture. And our assistance basically was to record these beautiful cultural landscapes, whether they're these rotational farms. Typically, if you see a rice farm, you'd probably think that it's all green and it's all rice. But the Karen practiced rotational rice farming that mixes seeds of various plants so that all the nutrients aren't sucked out of just kind of monoculture. And so we did these agricultural drawings. It's first controlled burning and then becomes kind of compost. And then eventually they spread the seeds. And this is their wonderful, my pointer's turned off, but you can see this series of strings that are attached to shirts on a hanger. This is their scarecrow system. So you can see this gentleman in this hut is pulling on a string. So it wiggles all the shirts and becomes, you know, a manual scarecrow. Right. And here you can see kind of the rotational crops starting to emerge where it's not just rice. And this is a rice cultivation. We looked at architecture. This is called a tian na, or rice field hut, that allows you to kind of collect the grains. But also, we studied this beautiful bamboo planting mix canisters where they mix rice and sesame, chili, melon, squash into this one canister to kind of spread throughout the farm to create this multi-seed plantation. We looked at furniture. The Karen are experts at bamboo because they have wild bamboo growths all over, and they're kind of the tectonics of their benches that are kind of integrated with trees is quite beautiful. So with all of this, again, we looked at everything, not only architecture, but furniture, tools and artifacts, ecology. We spent 2 years with them. And eventually, there came a program where the villagers wanted a market, a simple roadside market that was along this interstate freeway. So cars would be zooming by, and they had this little plot. There's my wife beckoning us in. And as we turn left, you'll see 9 food stands that basically the villagers wanted us to kind of recreate, but do so in a way that would catch the attention from the speeding cars along the road. So again, the Karen were experts in bamboo construction because they lived with it with their whole lives in the forest, and the bamboo was plentiful and free and accessible. And when we asked them what they wanted in terms of programming, they said, well, we want 9 food stalls and a community eating area, but we don't want a typical city food court. We don't want a building or a modern neighborhood mall, but a place where the community can come be with nature, and they said, feel the wind. I saw all the time a lot of elders and even young people just sitting in the field and just absorbing the wind and really feeling the breezes go through them. And so what we did was we didn't create a food court. We created an infrastructure or a vessel that basically was able to kind of accommodate these tungs. Tungs are string mobiles that as wind passes starts to spin and dance. This is kind of the first conceptual 3D model we made for them. It was more like a vessel, as I said. But here we created these, oh, sorry, let me go back. Sorry. So we created these bamboo wind chimes in 3D that really didn't work, and we got called out on it. One of the villagers said, this isn't gonna work. The bamboo isn't gonna be kind of pushed by the wind enough. So they took matters into their own hands. So they created their own concoction. So they attached the tung to the little pellet in the middle of the bamboo. And so that became a sail that made the bamboo create a sound. So this is the last video of the final product. Thank you so much. I made good time, right?
Excellent, excellent. Wow, thank you so much. It is actually incredible work and very, very moving. Wow, where to begin? As I see your work now, I mean, first of all, again, thank you for bringing this incredibly moving work to us and to share it with family.
Yes, I feel
So
like
I
it's
think
family. I feel like I'm at home.
That's a really big part of it for us that you could come back to share this. I was thinking about the fact that all of the work that you're showing. I mean, first of all, there's an incredible delicacy to it that part of it is it's so ephemeral. It sort of reveals its vulnerability. It's clearly looking at issues of the wind, and this kind of very delicate nature of the work. I'm curious for you, how does this way of thinking and working, how can it scale? Can it scale?
Hopefully that's the next stage. If you look at the Indigo Loom House, we want to scale it up, but then we have to kind of do it in a way that's sustainable and also feasible. For example, if we scale up the Indigo Loom House, we won't be able to afford these big columns of wood. So that the next step is to substitute that with telephone poles and electrical poles. That is the next stage. So we keep just kind of bastardizing.
So the loom condo would recycle would upcycle other kinds of materials more actively.
And I think what happens is I don't try to latch onto words like sustainability and green, and I just learn from the people, and whatever makes sense and feasible and doesn't use up too much. Even if it's concrete, right? There's no reason that concrete is not sustainable. It depends on how long you want it to last. So for me, it's really going with the flow and really learning from the bastards that I draw. I think it's very important that I'm not a researcher at heart. I only do it to teach myself because I felt like I didn't have enough knowledge when I went back to Thailand. So it was a way to kind of if I can elaborate, it was a struggle for me when I went back to Thailand. You come from the GSD and there's a lot of pressure, right? And I wanted to kind of find myself, but then the work that I was doing at first just wasn't very good because it wasn't responding to tropicality. It didn't have a spirit of culture. I just felt I didn't have the tools, and that's why I started researching Bangkok Bastards. There was stuff that wasn't architecture, but were things, whether they're food carts or love motels or shantytowns, that made me excited about architecture because there were some interesting elements of creativity there. And I had to force myself to draw it because I knew that was the only way that I could extract architecture from it. I always say, I'm not an activist. I don't want to be an activist. But I try to see things as with design value and let things unfold. Yeah.
Well, maybe I wanted to ask a little bit about that because, like, you use the term bastards and then you also use the term crossbreeds. And as I was thinking through it, it seems to me that they're functioning in two different ways. Like, on the one hand, crossbreeds are the active combination of two things to make a third thing. Mm-hmm. For example, the loom and the house. So the pavilion then becomes the loom house. Mm-hmm. And that has become its own third, right. Clearly its own third thing. Right. And then the bastard has an idea about that untraceable lineage. Right. And that maybe it's not necessary for it to be so explicit that it's the hybridization or crossover between this plus that. Right. So maybe can you talk a little bit about when is the distinction helpful to you, or does it help you to move to all of the your constituents. Are you declaring that condition of either the hybridization of something, or are you sneaking it in? Or just tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Bastards came first. Because I was looking at things that I didn't know where the lineage came from, right? And there were things that people didn't look at normally. And there were usually mixes of something, but I didn't know what the parents were. Because a bastard is basically, you know one of your parents, usually your mother, or you don't know who your father is. But then it doesn't become important anymore because you've got this thing in front of you that's incredibly creative, and they're not reproducible. That's an important thing. One time I was talking about architecture, and I use the word typology, and a great Japanese architect, Orokishi, that I love and admire, said, "Chat, in Asia we don't have typologies, we only have strategies." And to me whoa, that's deep. Because you can have things that perform the same way, but they don't have to look the same at all, because it's not a top-down thing, it's a bottom-up. It's like, I only find plywood here, but here they're kind of discarded steel. And you combine them together, they do the same thing, but they don't look the same. They're not typologies. I don't know. That to me is related to kind of this nameless bastard, where it's its own thing and it may not be producible. But the lessons you learn from learning to improvise, rather than having a set of rules, that taught me the most. It wasn't this pattern book, but when I start to work and I see how villages worked, I was less stressed, because if a problem came, I was, oh, we'll fix it. We'll just put this with that, with this, with that. And it becomes, this improvisation became second nature to solving problems and putting things together.
That seems particularly evident in the shop house, in the love motels, in the urban condition, especially when you're looking at that condition of scaffolding and other kinds of and the ways in which you've made that. But it seems like and I don't know if this is a fair characterization, but it seems like then the work that you're doing in more rural communities tends to be more crossbreed. Is that
yes.
right? And is there are you finding that it's helpful in the context of an urban condition to actually declare something of the lineage, or how are you, like when you're talking to one of your
right.
Papatoni?
Sure. It really depends on the situation. With the Love Motel, I've been researching construction worker houses for about 8 years. I've been looking at Love Motels for about 7 years. And this is what happens. I research, and then one person comes along. It's a marriage. And I go straight to that person. I propose this. And this is how I start to get jobs now, because I want to determine the type of jobs I want. I don't want developers to tell me what I want to do. So my research now has led me to, I've become the Love Motel guy, all right? But it expands wider into recycling kind of things and integrating things from kind of local culture that normal people kind of look past. Yeah.
I want to give some opportunity to our students. I could continue talking. In the middle there? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lecture. My question is, where do you draw the line of role of architect, in the sense that I think there's for instance, for the Oyster Pavilion, I think architects create a space, but the activating that space is sort of outside of our daily job description. And how do you facilitate those relationships and make that space actually successful after you create it?
Time. All of my projects are 5 years, 6 years. It starts with me being interested in research. It's like, oh, I love that scaffolding. I'm going to rent a boat and go out. I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to go out, I want to draw it. It just starts with this enthusiasm I have for looking at these things, and I get into it. And then more and more, I start to kind of gravitate towards kind of projects that have really interesting kind of case studies, right? And you spend time with them enough in terms of research, and you develop relationships along the way. Again, it's bottom up. I never had the intention of doing an ocean scaffolding. It was actually one of 7 really architectural elements in the master plan we did for the developer. But that project caved, and I didn't want to give up because we'd spent so much time with the fishermen, we bonded with them, and I just picked the cheapest component, and I went and found my own money. So I got $300,000 from the Ministry of Culture. Actually $300,000 for kind of doing a design build studio, and another $100,000 bought from Ministry of Culture, and we built the scaffolding. So that was during COVID too, where didn't have many jobs. So I tried to use the time wisely, but that investment now is returning, where we're starting to determine the type of jobs that we're getting.
And I think your question was also about, like, how do you ensure the programmatic use of the of the pavilion, for example?
Yep. They all range. It really, with the last 3 projects, it depends on the strength of the community. I can honestly say the scaffolding isn't as successful as my first project. I didn't engage with the Port Authority, with the Fisheries Commission as much, so now we're having problems with it. The Indigo Loom House is much more successful because it's on private property, and the owner, Kun Man, was able to kind of, work on it. The ingenious project is successful because I have this university backing me, because they're helping create new economies, and I'm kind of latching on to them and providing architectural services. So they're all very different. I'm starting to learn that I can't do it alone like I did with the oyster scaffolding. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in that regard, the regulatory frameworks and the other kinds of collaborations or partnerships do need to be quite
very much
strategic in
very
that way.
much.
Another question. I saw another hand up here. Oh, back all the way near the booth.
Just a question about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with adaptive reuse. Do you see yourself making adaptive reuse projects where you take already existing buildings and add your own cultural interpretation to it?
Actually, most of our projects now in Bangkok, which I haven't shown, are all adaptive reuse. So I really see value in that. I think there was kind of a stigma before where you do adaptive reuse. It's like you're not really doing architecture, you're not creating the new, but my attitude has completely changed. Even before COVID, people in Thailand, in Bangkok, had to wear masks because we had this PM 2.5 microdust problem. And a lot of it is because of this demolition and new construction, creating all this dust. That's the point where I said, wow, I actually want to do adaptive reuse, because this overbuilding and over-demolishing is actually creating havoc on our everyday lives. So things have changed, where I look forward to adaptive reuse projects now.
Thank you.
And in that context, the adaptive reuse that you're referring to, for example, the Shop House is the Shop House Metropolis Studio. Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know Chat Studio, there's a whole section of the Shop House typology, which is slated for demolition, but that you're actually trying to find a way to re-inhabit.
Right. At a certain point in from the 1960s to the 1980s, if you owned a piece of property, you didn't know what to do, you basically built a shop house, right? It was to the point where it became ubiquitous. You saw a shop house on every major street. At this point right now, people see shop houses almost garbage, right? But I see it in a different way, because there are these beautiful party wall structures that line every pretty major street. So instead of seeing that as architecture, I see it as infrastructure that could solve a lot of problems, whether it's low-income housing. Because right now, lifestyles have changed, where the shop house that used to accommodate commercial on the bottom and the families who go live on top, right now those families don't want to live in Bangkok, so they rent out the bottom level to a store, and the top levels are empty now. right? So it's only being utilized 25%, let's say. So we see the opportunity, these great human-scale buildings. Why would we demolish them? Because they're already ready for us to reuse, and they're everywhere. So that's what the studio is based on, to kind of recycle 450,000 shop houses in Thailand. Yeah.
Dean Whiting?
Thanks for a wonderful, wonderful talk, and actually also just the way you express the enthusiasm for the projects and then the beauty of the projects. It's an amazing combination. I wanted to go back to the question of time, because you sort of casually say, you know, these projects take 7 years or they take time, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on your process of time and then on bringing that back to the GSD, a place where probably when you were a student you didn't take 7 years to do a project, I'm assuming. And so how you're sort of reintroducing a different concept of time and designing with time back into the school.
Thank you for that question. It does kind of link back to a larger question. I told you that when I went back to Thailand, I was really struggling because the work that I was doing, I basically have, on the one hand, I could look at traditional vernacular houses on stilts, temples, but that wasn't going to help me building something in the city. I could look at Caesar or I could look at Rem, but that didn't have this tropical Thai element. So what I thought of doing, I literally thought this, I thought I was going to create this encyclopedia of Bangkok Bastards that I would do until the day I die. Because I felt like we didn't have a history of architecture of Thailand. If I came back to the GSD, for you all to comment intelligently on it, you'd have to have a background knowledge of Bangkok Bastards in order to, or else you'd be commenting on the things that you knew through the lens of Western modernism or through the studio system. And I felt like that wasn't fair. Like, I can't blame people who don't have knowledge of it. I need to create this new history so that you can come in, study it, and then start to speak about it on my terms. So to me, that was really important. So time meant I have to be patient in building this up, and that's why I have this kind of open source website so that everybody else can contribute to it. I can't do it alone. So I have friends in Malaysia, Indonesia, in Singapore who are contributing to this. Yeah, so that's kind of a larger answer to your question of time, because it's a larger project. It isn't just me doing research.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, so you have, of course, Chat Architects, which is your practice,
Yes.
in which you're working on your design work,
Right.
and then you have Bangkok Bastards, which is a research platform,
Yeah.
where all of the becomes the repository for all of
Right.
these also incredible drawings. Professor Naginski. Erica.
Thank you for a beautiful talk. I just have a very simple question. I was struck by the, lovely rhetorical frame of when you saw an object that fascinated you, said, I have to draw that. Could you talk a little bit more about drawing?
When you practice, we may complain about having to draw and make models in the GSD right now, you guys. But when you
Don't complain. They love it.
But when you finish and you go out and you spend every day in meetings, on the phone, kind of conducting all, I miss drawing. And it's really the thing that gives me joy. So every morning I wake up and I find a reason to draw for an hour or so before I go into the office, because it's a way to, I may feel down. I do a drawing, in the morning. It looks pretty good. Something bad happens at the office. The next morning I wake up, I look at the drawing. Hey, that's a pretty nice drawing. Good job, Chad. You have to find a way to every day create enthusiasm, to build yourself up every day. Right? A little bit of joy goes a long way. So that's I've practiced that, right?
But I did notice that you're particularly invested in the axonometric, which is really, it seems to be your drawing type of
It is,
choice.
it is.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because it's actually been quite some time since I've seen that many, especially layered axonometrics. So
That's a good question. Well, I love perspective, but it's hard to kind of, I'm a disciple of Nader. I love perspective. But with respect to perspective, it's basically just a kind of a one view of a totality. But the isometric, I think, gives kind of an overall neutrality to all surfaces, and especially the ground, the water. To me, the context is so important when I'm drawing Bangkok, that I want to see the house that's next to the stinky canal that's next to whatever, and the textures and the colors that bleed from the architecture to the ecology, to me, is important. So that's probably one of the reasons. You can say that could bleed in section and plan too, but to me, the isometric allows me to kind of do a field.
yeah, I mean, I think it's your insistence on the field, which is one thing, and then also it seems to me to work through the temporal nature of it as a system.
Yes.
And so that's also you're working through as an organizational diagram as well. So I think that's what you're combining in that particular drawing type. It's very pronounced.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful lecture, which I think touches on a topic that doesn't get talked about enough in North America. I want to preface my question by just observing that, like, in the workers' housing, talked about, like, if the workers run out of corrugated sheet, then they end up with plastic siding, which kind of acts like as a flexible kind of informal window. And then I was looking through the lecture, and then a lot of the examples that you brought up were open air, like in the fact that they're not totally sealed, of course, with the exception of the Love Motel. And so I was just wondering, like, if we were to take this kind of strategy and apply to other places which require, much more weatherproofing, is this kind of practice compatible in your view? Like, is there kind of like maybe, like one of the reasons why like this kind of architecture is usually shunned because like it's not able to seal us from external conditions, which I think has influenced a lot of North American architecture and design.
I think so. I think because the humidity in Thailand and the mold, it isn't just kind of comfort level for people, but materials and systems can degrade when moisture gets in. So this allows not people to breathe, but also the building to breathe, which is very important. Something I had to kind of teach myself, which I think is important. I was having this conversation with the studio, my studio as well. One of the things that I have had to change, let's say when I do a model of a massing model, I don't like the word massing because you cut things in a box and it becomes a mass and you carve things out of it. That's a normal thing you do when I was at the studio. But now working at Thailand, I never start a model as a solid. It's always a frame. Because the construction is either concrete construction, concrete frame, wood frame, or whatever. So even the way I practice culturally has changed because I'm in the tropics or in an area where the frame rules, right? I know that may not answer your question directly, but there are a lot of things that have changed the way I design because of the tropics and culturally.
With the white sweater? Yes, sorry. Sorry, microphone's coming. Thank you. This is being recorded, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This is incredibly fascinating. And I don't mean to spoil the mood, but how do you make a living? How do you get paid for this? I mean, your projects are going on for 7 years, and they're kind of dynamic in terms of how you go about it. So
yeah. I have 3 hotels that I didn't show you. So I have to have a balance of making money, teaching, and research. I have what I call the golden triangle, where research, teaching, and practice. If I can't achieve something here, I go to these other things. So whatever I can't achieve in practice, I do research. If I can't do research, I can't get to where I want, I teach about it. So that really helps me to skip. A lot of people do that, right?
I do wonder, though, so that's really interesting, because I am also curious, at this school, when mass design came into being, it was partly out of the brainchild of Paul Nakazawa's class, Frameworks of Architecture, where they were looking at, like, how do we make a nonprofit kind of practice? And so are you actually thinking about that? Is that something that you've been, again, a for-profit practice is quite different than a nonprofit practice, and also, of course, the sources of funding, et cetera, really completely change when you are in the nonprofit system or organization.
If I may extend, I'm at a stage that's in flux in a good way, because all the projects, the last 3 projects that I've showed you, have gotten the attention of developers who now want to integrate working with community, materials, crafts into their hotel project or their whatever project. So now that's able to help me shift to create a type of hotel that I want that is working in sync with the community. So hopefully it's strategic, so that, again, I'm pushing towards projects that I want that have. So it was worth investing in doing these small projects to me. Yeah.
I almost think that would be really interesting to study the anatomy of a practice like yours, because actually it was not only that triangle that you're referring to, but then within the triangle, within the small appendage of, or the piece of that triad of practice, it seems like there has to be a certain kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of strategy within the practice, that certain projects, at least in my practice, we do this with our infrastructure projects, because they're so long in the tooth, they take so much power and architectural attention, but they are very, 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 very sporadic.
Yes.
And the 12, 14 years is a common duration for an infrastructure project. So it seems like you have a rhythm of certain types of project that might be more steady and more predictable against the improvisation or this melody of other kind of project types.
Very much. Having these projects that end fast really gives energy to the office. So that, our members aren't waiting 3 or 4 years to finish, but we have work that's kind of, you see the product, the fruits of their labor, which I think is important for the morale of the office and for me as well. Yeah.
There is another question.
This one. You've been waiting so long.
No,
It's okay.
I think you
okay,
want the students to go.
Anna-Marie, no, it's okay.
Yes, let's.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'll give it back to you. Sorry. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this lecture so much, and I think there's a continuity between your very close attention to the ingenuity and the wisdom in the artifacts and just architecture of the everyday that you've been observing, to the way in which in each of these projects you've shown us how you build community with the folks that are going to operate, live in, sell, eat in that place. And we've seen many pictures of you breaking bread and having oysters. And it seems to me that this is another form of research that you do. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more of this making community that we sometimes don't pay attention that much as we should.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, because I want to reiterate again that a lot of these successful projects wouldn't happen if it weren't for the team of my wife, who are researchers and actually work with community development. Like, what I do is very little compared to what she's doing. She's creating new, for example, the indigenous projects, she's going to research textiles and developing new fashions for the young people. She's developing new rice products with the villagers. So architecture for me, it's only a little bit, and I'm riding on the coattails of larger movements of cultural development, which is very important. It's not just architecture is very little, so it needs to kind of embrace other disciplines as well. It's part of it. It's part of it. Yeah, and in doing so, it allowed me to expand to not only draw buildings, but rotation farms, clothes, mobiles. To me, it's great. I love drawing other things that is interesting. That's not just architecture. But maybe it's also art. But yes, exactly.
Behind every great man is a great woman.
Yes, always.
All right, we're ending here. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chad. That was for your wife.